not everyone could see my shoes, but I knew that Karl was going to wear something really cool, and so I tried to keep up with that. And since Jim I knew was going to be wearing Jordans, I felt like I was okay to wear them. So great to be back here. I'll give a quick intro on myself. First of all, I'm going to give another shout out to Jim. I see him behind the scenes at NC Idea meetings and everything he tries to do to promote and pump up this ecosystem here, and it's real. Tom can vouch with me on this one. It is real. He has your back in every meeting behind closed doors. Thanks, Jim. So, I'm Tim McLoughlin. Some of you have seen me here before speaking. I'm the managing partner at Co-Founders Capital. We are a venture capital firm investing in seed stage B2B software companies in the Southeast. We've raised almost $100 million across our 3 funds. We've deployed about $60 million of that into startups and investments. Most of that has been in North Carolina, probably over 2/3 of that in North Carolina, including $6.5 million here in Wilmington. And we hope that number gets a lot more.
Tell them which 2 companies you invested in.
We're invested in Easyvote Solutions, which some of you might know in the GovTech space. Charles Davis is the CEO and one of the founders of that company that's here. And we've invested in Approved Payments. Robert Preble, some of you might know around here, used to be Quipt. And I have to tell this funny story. Sorry, Karl, we'll get to you in a second. But the funny story is, I first met RB, we call him, when he applied for an NC Idea grant back in 2015. About 8 years later, he had a different company. He had a company that spun out of that company that we wound up putting $2 million into. We knew him through NC Idea, and that's where we built the relationship. They didn't win an NC Idea grant, but that's where I made the relationship that he wound up raising money for. So that's an example of impact in the network that we're helping build here. So with that, I'm going to turn to start firing questions at my friend Karl here. And I knew we were going to become friends. How did I know? Well, first of all, I saw him at the entrepreneurial events. Then I started running into him at the Carolina Hurricanes hockey games. And if anybody knows me, I'm a hockey guy and love it. So I started seeing him there. Then I started seeing him in the same lines that we were at all these, getting beer at all these private foundation events. I saw his shoes too, and I'm like, this is a guy I want to be hanging out with. So Karl and I were on the executive committee, are still on the executive committee together at the Center for Entrepreneurial Development. And so that's where we've gotten to know each other the best over the last couple of years. So great to be here with you.
I'm excited to be here.
All right, cool. Well, we're going to jump in. So I just gave a little background on kind of what I did. Give us a little bit of the backstory and maybe the origin story of work.
Sure. It's great to be here, and thanks again. Again, Karl, Rectanus. I was a teacher and administrator. Graduated from Chapel Hill as a North Carolina teaching fellow. I taught high school and then was an administrator inside charter schools. The first year's charter schools got started. I ended up being a CFO for a set of charter schools, and then, as Grandma said, had itchy feet and moved to Japan, taught English in Japan for a few years. Chased a girl to Australia. She's now my wife. But I wasn't legal to work in Australia as an American. She's Canadian. She was getting her MBA in Sydney. I was not legal to work. But turns out you still need money to pay for beer in Australia too. So ended up starting a small company where I was covering the Olympics and sort of from away questions for children's museums and schools. And this was the early days of the internet and email. I realized, so every night kids would go to what used to be called Explorus now, or it's the Children's Museum in Raleigh, or some of these schools. I would get a list of questions that they had given at the exhibit. You know, how tall is the Dutch swim team? Are there really sharks in the Sydney Harbor? And so while they were sleeping, I'd wake up, I'd answer these questions at a 4th or 8th grade level over a cup of coffee, send them back, and I'd be on the beach by 10:30, and they loved it. I was helping thousands of students without actually being in the classroom or dealing with or working through all the challenges of running a school. And I realized maybe there's other ways to have impact on students and teachers, and that's when I got the bug. And so have launched or led 4 successful education innovation organizations here in the U.S. The last one was called Learn Platform. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that, but just to do the full circle thing, after a couple of years of diligence, while I was running a consulting organization, we decided it was time to pull the trigger, and we applied for an NC IDEA and were successful in winning their seed grant in 2014. But for that support, that process, I don't think Learn would exist. So Tom, and to the predecessors, what a gift to North Carolina, but personally, thank you in meaningful ways. And as we were able to launch in 2014, we were part of the Kaplan Techstars Accelerator. We went on from there, and we'll talk a little bit more about the journey. Just to give you context, though, Learn Platform was a bit of a category-creating company. Things that we were doing did not exist before that. Learn Platform helps school districts and now states and providers figure out which of all the different education technologies that students are using is helping them learn. We applied what is standard in, for example, pharmaceuticals. Everybody's familiar with probably the pharmaceutical trial model, right? We don't just
headquarters of PPD here, so yeah.
I would expect that to be the case.
Yeah.
Short version is we don't just throw medicine into a bunch of sick people and say, if it doesn't work, we'll fix it next quarter. Which is what, at the time, lean startup development was. And it doesn't work in education either. But education didn't have a similar sort of model. So imagine a situation where, phase 1 trials for pharmaceuticals, taking bench science and applying it to small groups. Phase 2, you get a little more larger in sizes, start to study side effects, some other things. Phase 3, more rigor before being approved. Phase 4 is in-market trials. Well, education at the time had randomized control trials that cost $3 to $7 million and were out of date by the time they were published, while software is being built, again, monthly releases. Or pilots, people trying stuff. And so we built technology using researchers out of NC State and some other places that helped understand which were all the ed tech tools that were being used. And when they were used, we applied data analytics and machine learning and rapid cycle evaluations to figure out in which ways they were helping students learn of which types. So that was the context of the business.
So I'm curious on your career journey across the globe. When you started to consider yourself an entrepreneur, was this something you're like, I want to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to do it? I remember I started a company out of college and I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I started it, built it, incorporated it, started getting clients, and I didn't realize I was an entrepreneur until I was switching money from my personal bank account to the business bank account and back again before my wife could find out. So when did you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
Well, it wasn't when I was investing money.
No investors, no investors.
My mother is a teacher, was a middle school teacher. She raised 2 boys on her own in North Carolina. For those of you who are also Gen X, a single mom raising 2 boys in the South on her own is an entrepreneur. A teacher, education, a lot of my family are educators, so that's sort of the family business. So by default, I didn't know I could be anything but a teacher or an educator. I didn't see those opportunities. We didn't have a lot of resources. But over time, what I realized is as a teacher, you're walking into a classroom with 25 to 35 students or customers where you're trying to add value, deliver value to different needs with very limited resources and trying to help them move forward, trying to help them solve their problems. And so, for me, I never thought of it as entrepreneurship. It was really around solving problems. And, we had to, I would say the first time I really thought that I was an entrepreneur, or thought about it in that context, was in Australia. I'd been in education, I'd been driving, like I said, I'd run the books for schools. I'd learned a lot about how the system worked and did not work on behalf of students and the adults in the system too. But I think, that said, when I look backwards, my first job was cleaning out the inside of tractor trailers in this weather with a heater. I was like, that's too damn hot. So I ended up working in restaurants, learned a lot. Most of it was not, on the financial books. You learn a lot when you work in restaurants. I see a lot of people smiling. That turned out to be hard work once I got to college. I tried interning for a law firm. I made it about 3.5 weeks, and I was so bored I could not do it anymore. And so, was always mowing lawns or doing all the things that you would, but that was just about survival and figuring out how to help other people and put food on the table.
Nice. Well, let's fast forward a little bit, and we'll ask about the origin story of Learn. But after you had a couple of startups and you're working in the space, you have to make a decision as to what is worth your time, right? What is your worth your time to attack next? And whether you define that through financial returns or impact that you're creating. I'm curious how, when you got into the Learn days and you were thinking about that, how you were vetting the opportunity to see if it was worth your time.
Yeah. So two things. One, I believe entrepreneurs, and thinking about this as just professionals, I believe strongly in thinking about what success looks like for you in the future, 5, 8, 10 years down, and trying to mechanize towards that, because nobody else is doing that on your behalf. At some point you have to just decide, and all of us have gotten the question that is like, hey, I'm looking for a job, or can you help me? And my question back is, well, what will help you? What is long-term success, and how do you think you're going to get there? And so I had taken the time. At the time, we were, I have 3 daughters, 3 teenage daughters now, which means my house is emotions and logistics. That's all we do. We're overly blessed. But at the time, my youngest was, she was 3 years old. So we had 3 kids under 6. We had a well-run consulting firm. I was advising the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the North Carolina Chamber, a bunch of others, and doing great work. But I had an itch around what became Learn. And part of the success, my goal, I actually laid out a matrix of what success looked like for me in terms of business terms, impact terms, and financial terms. And so, of those, when I looked ahead, I wanted to be in a situation where I could lead a larger team. I was doing, if you're consulting, it's eat what you kill. You can grow that, but I don't love a services business. I'm more of a 10X guy. And so I wasn't really compelled by that. I did want to have outsized impact. I really get excited about how do we drive systems to move? How do we think about making the system a better system? Not just, I'm not a widget guy. I think I have deep respect and sometimes jealousy for folks who make a widget and sell a widget and make more widgets. Like it sounds glorious. It's more complicated than that. But I'm more about a system impact. And then finally, to be very candid, education was, I had been the youngest guy in the room in education policy circles for some time and heard a bunch of people who were nearing the end of their career complain about things that they had been complaining about when they were my age. And I said, well, this isn't going to work. Like, I don't want to be you complaining about this thing that we're complaining about now. And but there were a lot of people that didn't really have. I would say they weren't saying what they really thought. They were saying what their organization, what was politic, what would get them near-term dollars. The only people who were saying the things that I really, vibed with and thought was honest was they were one of 2 things. They were too old to care. They did not care about what anybody said anymore. Or they were too rich to care. They didn't care. And I didn't want to get old quicker.
But you wanted to get rich.
Well, I thought that's a way that I could get into a conversation in a room and speak truth to power. Because I was having conversations and people would say one thing, and after the meeting I'd say, don't you think this? And they'd say, yeah, but the company needs X or Y. And so one of the things I had learned was if we could drive this in such a way that could have systemic impact, providing data at the speed of decision making, which was missing, then we could actually have a huge impact. And it turns out there's an approach that fundamentally we actually got offered 7 figures from large education foundations very early on to be a nonprofit. And 2 things that I thought, and so I turned down north of $3 million immediately and a pathway to $20 million on an idea, which is a pretty stupid thing to do.
I think we call it internal fortitude.
Well, yeah, I think, so what I call it is impact-centered leadership or impact-centered organization. We were really focused on how we could drive the impact we wanted to drive. I was told it was a stupid thing to do, but for us it was only about a 48-hour decision, which the speed of decision-making matters, and so that was not something we stressed over. But we did it for 2 reasons. One, because they would have been our customer. We would have now been a customer of the philanthropy, not of the school districts, states, organizations that we actually wanted to serve, and we would be more responsive to them than to what we wanted to. I'd seen that grant-funded model. I didn't think it would work for what we were trying to do. And 2, it was not a pathway to the seat I'm sitting in now, where I think I can continue to have positive impact. Purely, it's not couth to say I wanted to get rich, especially as an educator. But Jim says I got to tell the truth when I'm here. So to be clear, it was part of it. It wasn't the only thing. It wasn't the primary. But if we do this right, there might be a situation where I can say whatever I want to whomever I want, whenever I want, and we have not completely screwed it up.
FU money.
Yeah.
So we've been talking a lot at our firm about what we're looking for in entrepreneurs and certain characteristics that make us kind of want to invest. And one of the things is, why is this entrepreneur choosing this opportunity? And if you look at what Karl just said about the intersection of his personal beliefs, the financial goals, the problem in the market, and how he stress tests the opportunity, that is an answer as we're sitting there on the other side of the table to the why is he choosing this opportunity? Why are they choosing this? That is a very, very good answer and one that you want to back. If it's, I'd like to get this to $1 million in revenue and flip it for $5 million or $6 million on an exit, that ain't it. If it's, this is the first problem I found and I'm attacking it, that's probably not it either, right? And so if you look at the intersection of all these things, it's something as an investor, for those of you that are going to look and raise money, that's going on in the back of their head the entire time.
Yeah, I think, having aligned interests is important. I think he said, you're going to make money and you'll lose money, especially as an entrepreneur. But true success is getting to work with people you actually want to work with. And if you think about it, most people have to work with people they don't really want to work with. My success throughout Learn, I would count amongst that sort of driver. We picked who we worked with. And if you're very effective, you deliver, you get to pick everything. As entrepreneurs, a lot of times people ask me quite a bit, do you know anybody with $2 million? We're trying to. The nice thing and lucky is we do know people with money, but the reality is this is not busking. You're not asking for a handout. You're selling a ticket onto your ship. You get to drive the ship. In fact, only you will get to drive the ship until you sell too much of the ship. But you're selling a ticket, and so getting a chance to work with people that you actually want to work with, including investors, is an important part of that decision-making process.
Yeah, totally. All right, so we're going to go back. A lot of you here for the NCID, it's early money. It's money that's there to help you prove something out. So you didn't have hundreds of customers. You didn't have millions of dollars in revenue. Do you remember what you were presenting to NCID, what traction you had, where you were in your journey, and what you were saying you were going to do with early money that you got, non-dilutive funding, relatively small, what you raised over the life of the company, raised?
So we ended up getting $47K, I think, that year.
I owe you $3,000.
Yeah.
That's
They're good.
exactly how much
Shorted
my
them for it.
sponsorships are.
You know, the thing, it's not just the destination, it's the journey. You know, part of that process, one of the things I remember, at the time there was a little tool, I don't know if Prezi still exists, is Prezi still a tool? So Prezi was this like dynamic presentation slide thing, instead of Google Slides or others. And so I had built this Prezi, and basically pre-process, I went and pitched, I must have pitched 150 people during that time. And I would set up meetings to ask, go through and pitch this idea, and we were pitching a three-legged stool. We believed in education, the three-legged stool was, you needed a capital or a thoughtful incubator, venture fund or an incubator to think, because education was a special market, you needed to understand and help these companies grow. You could really do a lot of positive good if you had a network of schools who were willing to try this stuff. They were piloting and giving feedback rapidly. And then you had a fund source, so accelerator, a fund, and a network of schools to try these things. And once you got feedback, you could fund the best ones. That was the original pitch. Fast forward 150 pitches later, and by the time we apply, which, by the way, I remember changing the Prezi between my 9 a.m. pitch and my 10:30 pitch. 10 to 10:30 was fixing the Prezi to pitch slightly differently, or something I heard from, or try something else. We actually realized we were the top of the stool, not those three legs. Those things existed. What didn't exist was a software or technology to connect ed tech companies and schools and funds to give them a shared system of truth on what was working and how to collect that. And so during that process, we really refined, that was the pitch, was Learn Trials, a network to do pharmaceutical trials for education, to take this idea. The 47 was to cover our first, actually to move from a prototype into an alpha that would equip us. It would pay somebody who became our founding CTO and is now the CEO of Dual Boot, Ben Gilman, who covered, who was a part of the Learn platform journey. Dual Boot sort of spun out over time. And so we built the alpha and did customer engagement with those funds. We also did something that I think was important when you get these types of momentum builds, is we kept looking. We went and took our progress and shared our progress with others, and that led to an opportunity to be a part of the Kaplan Techstars Accelerator starting in, I think it was July, August of that same year.
So you had gotten the money, you had proved something out, you built something, and you had joined Techstars.
Yep.
I'm curious what in the Techstars mentorship that you got, or things that they hammer home. And I've been a advisor to the MedLife Techstars InsurTech Accelerator, mentor there, and so I've seen the process that's there. But I'm curious, like your takeaway of one or two things that was like the key takeaways from the rigor they put you through in that accelerator.
A couple things. One, I'd be remiss if Jim mentioned Alex Vidor. So Alex was running a student-led project and trying to spin it up and build something that was tangentially, similar. A few people had talked to us about it and connected us, including Jim, and ultimately, through some agreements, decided to acquire what Alex was doing. He joined the team. Him, Ben, Alex, and I moved up to New York for 3 months for the Techstars, Kaplan Techstars Accelerator. And during that process, one of the things, they do a mentor madness, which is after the first week, you do 3 weeks, you meet with 5 mentors a day for 20 to 30 minutes. Pitch them for the first 10, hear feedback, and then talk. You come out of those, we call it mentor whiplash. Literally had all sorts of things you're hearing one person say this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. The next guy is like, I think you should quit. Please, I've never heard, I'm now dumber for hearing what you said. The reality is, I realized we had something when, education, in the education space, there used to be sort of 5 big publishers. You're probably familiar if you bought books from Pearson, Hunt Mifflin, McGraw-Hill, Scholastic, etc. When basically the either the president or senior execs at each of those companies said, I do not want you in business, can I buy your data? I've realized, I think we may be onto something. They all told me I should quit, but if I don't quit, can we buy your data? And I said, okay, I think we're onto something and we're going to have an opportunity. The other thing that I would, so that was more about the organization. One of the other takeaways that I think has been really valuable is the idea of harnessing failure for success. And the term fail testing was used a lot with Lean. For those of you not familiar with it, the idea is instead of setting what success looks like, fail testing is setting what failure is. Defining what you'll invest, and then setting what failure looks like, and then deciding from there. As an example, one of the things we were trying to decide was if we should start a company, or if this thing wasn't, and I admit this was after the idea, but it was like, we got 3 kids under 6, like, talking to my wife, and ultimately we went out to a big education conference, an investors conference, and said, I told my wife, if we can't get 200K in commitments, I'm going to hang this up. Like, it's just not time. It's not ready. I'll stick with the business that we're doing. But if I do get more than 200, then we're gonna have to have some hard conversations. And the best situation is more pain and suffering. It is hard to grow a company, and ultimately came back from that with 300K in commitments. And I said, honey, if we're all in, it means that this Christmas will be fine, but next Christmas, best case scenario, is like really going to be challenging. And that was what happened. But ultimately, and we went on to raise 3 seed funds in Series A over time. But that idea of fail testing, how do you harness this? Everybody talks about like, failure is the way to learn. That was the most cogent way to think about, rather than thinking what success looks like. We have rose-colored glasses. Anybody who plays golf knows that, like, it's not the 92 other shots. It's the 3 shots that you think you hit well. You're still hitting 96, 95. But that's what brings you back. We'll find the 3 shots that make us happy. But if you set your failure rate and like, okay, I'm not going to continue to invest in something that's not working. By doing that, it really defined a pathway and a skill set that was really meaningful for our organization.
On that note, I'll say that people ask what the hardest thing about investing and working alongside the startups is, and I often say it's saying no over and over again. I mean, you say no 99.5% of the time, but the actual hardest thing is saying no to the entrepreneurs you've already invested in, because we don't do as good of a job as we could on the fail testing, which is setting the goal. What happens if you're short of that goal? Because there's always, next month's going to be a little bit better, and the month after this, and all of a sudden, an entrepreneur spent 2 or 3 years of their lives working on something that just isn't being receptive by the market, isn't working, and it's a really challenging task. Like, what if you raised 190K, right? And so I'm just saying that I don't have the answer to it, but that is one of the more challenging things about being an entrepreneur.
Found themselves like second guessing decisions they made, or doing analysis paralysis. A guy named T.A. McCann, who's a fantastic entrepreneur, started some great companies. But he was our sort of main mentor, primary mentor at Techstars. And it's a version of fail testing that he said, one great thing to do when you find yourself doing that, or maybe your team is second guessing you, pick a point in time and say, okay, this is the decision, and we're not going to revisit this decision for a month or for 3 months. Like, this is it, we've decided, and we're moving on. And we'll revisit it if it was a bad decision in 3 weeks or 3 months or what have you. But that little way of sort of saying, hey, give yourself permission to make a decision and then move on. Because if you spend all your time thinking through that mind share, it'll drive you crazy and you won't make progress. So I think one of the things that was most important coming out of that was this ability to figure out how to make decisions and get comfort with them. Because all you do is try to find a better way to do things. And so trying to be able to compartmentalize, take those fail tests, put them in front of you, and sort of decide, okay, I'm going to go talk to 10 customers, and if fewer than 3 of them take this, then like, okay, it's not working. Well, that doesn't stop you from getting 8 of 10. Like, go for it. But it does sort of set down, hey, if it's fewer than 3, okay, that's not enough. Like, we need to get better than that.
Yep. I think that's the most honest conversations we have with entrepreneurs, which is, you weren't doing this and you were doing something else, or you were selling a different product. What would you do in that amount of time, right? Versus continuing this for another year. Like, what would you do in the next year to move on and find something else? That doesn't mean give up, but it does mean set goals, test, and hold yourself kind of accountable to some of the numbers that you're putting out there, right?
This fail testing is so critical. Confidence is what we project outwards, right? You can fake confidence. You're required to. Conviction is what you feel internally. And the hardest part is, as an entrepreneur, I think, is being honest and figuring out, where do I feel strong conviction versus just projecting confidence? And how do I build conviction if I don't have it? And that's what fail testing did for us all along the way with Learn Platform, and for me, thinking about, okay, what would give me the conviction that this is the right path? And we would set that up with our leadership team project.
So this is going to take us maybe to the next stage of your journey at Learn. So as an investor, I think we can often tell the difference between the confidence, projected confidence, and the internal conviction of a founder when they come and present, right? I think you can tell sometimes when you're there. And so
I think VC hit rates would say you're wrong, but go ahead.
well, that's fair. That's very fair. No, very fair. I would like to say that that's the discussion we have afterwards.
Yeah,
Which is,
for sure.
Does that entrepreneur believe in what they're telling us?
Yeah.
And so we like to think. The other way I knew him was he made fun of me right away for being a VC the very first meeting we were in. So I was like, I'm gonna love this guy. And so what I would say is that's the discussion. Does this entrepreneur believe in what they're doing? So you decide, hey, you raise your 200K, you probably got a product to market, you're hitting on some metrics, you're doing the fail testing, you decide to go raise some larger seed funds and choose those investors, right?
Yeah.
What gave you the conviction that you should do that? How did you decide on who you were raising from, or how did you go about your process? And then what was it like working with those investors? I know that's a lot, but take it anywhere you want.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we raised a first seed, which included Techstars and some others. Ultimately, just to understand the journey, we raised 1.1 in 3 different tranches in our seed round, and ultimately raised $5 million additional in a Series A and a follow-on. Less than we could have, but I'm just, to outline my bias, I like knowing how I'm going to spend money before I'm in debt to anybody to go spend it. And so I'd rather...
Were those investors the same in the 3 seed rounds?
No, so just to be, let me tell you how I thought about, I do approach this, that ship analogy I mentioned earlier. There will be stormy seas. You will be the captain of the ship, or you or your folks. Your investors are along for the ride, and you're giving them, basically a chance to stand on the bridge with you. Hopefully you have somebody there who can say, oh, I remember when we had stormy seas, you should probably tack left, or you should probably pull it. We've seen this before. You want to have, I like having smart money. If it's dumb money, you want them to be quiet. But smart money is what we wanted, and so we recognized that we actually, for our business to work, we were a platform play. We needed more data. And we realized our customers, Wake County, New Hanover County, some of these school districts, they didn't just want to see next door neighbors, they wanted to see data from their peers. Houston ISD, Chicago Public Schools, these other places. So we had to be a national company that happened to be based in North Carolina, not a North Carolina company that grew. And so we targeted Techstars and Kaplan, and that was based in New York City. So we targeted New York City smart ed tech investors. We got money from Boston and Austin as well. And in the Valley, we actually participated. AT&T and Kaplan were both corporate investors. We recognized that if our platform was successful, it would eventually be very helpful to anybody investing in education. And so we wanted them to be along for the ride, to be helpful for us. And ultimately, we raised a Series A from New Markets Ventures, which is outside of Baltimore, education impact investors, and Emerson Collective. For those of you who aren't aware of Emerson Collective, it's Steve Jobs' wife, Lorraine Powell Jobs, and it's their fund. And they focus on education at the time, environment, immigration, and media. And so we were one of the first companies that they actually publicized that they were doing an investment in the education space, because one of the reasons they invested was, wait a second, if these guys are good and they can help customers, districts, choose products that are more effective at helping kids learn, our entire portfolio that cares deeply about how students learn should perform better. They're making our customers smarter. They're differentiating between edutainment and educational systems. And so not only was there value in a direct, well-run business that had SaaS metrics and enviable ARR, etc., but it was helping their whole portfolio. How did that help? Well, as an example, Emerson was a big sponsor. They sponsor events like this, but also much larger events in the education space. But they didn't want the visibility. They would say, hey, Karl, do you guys want the sponsorship? Do you want the placement? So the whole market started hearing about us, Learn Platform. We never paid for the sponsorship. They paid, but they didn't want the visibility. But because they put our logo up and they'd let us use their meetings rooms and all the expensive stuff, because we'd helped their entire portfolio grow. We were an amplifier. And so we tried to think about who would best help us get to the promised land over time. The investors, that's, I would say, more important than picking customers, is picking investors. And so we really tried to choose wisely through that process.
So, I think here, like a takeaway that we talk to our entrepreneurs about is whether you're selling or whether you're raising money, the investors or the customers you're selling to have different value props that they care about and they rank higher than others. So it could be making a great financial return. It could be creating positive impact for students in the world, positive impact for teachers in the world. What is the mandate that they're looking for, right? More data to make better decisions to grow the rest of their portfolio. Whatever that might be, it's not always financial return. It's not always ROI for a customer on financial, right?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, so that Series A, which was in 2018, pretty small for what we could have done, but we had mechanized it. So New Markets, which is very much multiple LPs, they need to return for their LPs. They have a sort of standard 2 and 20, and get 3 to 5x over the next
LPs
decade.
is limited partners, just investors in a venture capital fund. Yeah.
So they're expecting, like, they want to run a venture-backed company. Emerson Collective also wants to run a venture-backed company, but is worth liquid billions with a single LP that doesn't need the money back, but does care deeply about student outcomes and growth. And so having that dynamic on the board was part of the design, was having that sort of push and pressure from both sides to help us drive, center our impact, but use our impact as an accelerant, not just a cost or an outcome of the business.
So we'll get to the exit in a second,
Sure.
kind of the growth story, but on that I want to ask, how do you think you did a good job? It's completely different than what we're looking at now in terms of an outcome for our fund. So it's changed, and so I like now aligning before we invest, making sure we're in lockstep with what the founder is considering a success for them. And it changes, but.
Well, I think the thing that's often missing in relationships is trust. And it's so challenging, especially in the business space. And there's only one way to build trust. It's to set expectations and then go meet or exceed those expectations. And then repeat. You can say you're going to do some stuff, you can talk, but you got to go walk the walk. And so, one, by getting some alignment around what are our goals for this year, what are our expectations, what do we want to get done, how do we want to run the, if you ask new markets, probably the negotiation on that term sheet took a lot longer than they would have liked because we were setting expectations of what we would and wouldn't agree to and what was going to be real and what wasn't. And so, of course, adjustments happen along the way. But because we had built trust by meeting expectations, by delivering on what we were doing, and then going and resetting, I don't know about you, everybody here expected COVID, right? So, you're going to have things that happen that you just don't, you can't expect. I'm really proud of the way our team approached things like those changes because we'd engage on what needed to happen, what our core values were. We really used that pretty deeply. We didn't have any layoffs during that year. No regrettable churn. We did take salaries down from the top all the way, but the top took a much larger salary cut than smaller ones. Our schools were in a real question mark. We weren't sure what that would look like. Ultimately, that was an accelerant for technology adoption and where we fit. But consistent communication that sets expectations and then and understands what their expectations are is really critical to the whole process.
And I would say, thinking about it from a founder in the conversation with investors is what does success look like today? It's stop pitching on what the initial opportunity was. Sometimes success today looks like getting out of a deal and winding a company down without getting sued. Sometimes for us it's, hey, getting 50 cents back on our dollar. Sometimes it's maybe we can make our money back, or sometimes it's 1.5xing our entire fund. Like, what is it today? And keep having that honest conversation about what defines success.
I think I talk a lot, with founders quite a bit and operators, and get a chance now to just take random phone calls, and I don't know what we're going to talk about. But the number of times that I see folks who are what I call fighting ghosts explain why we got to this place. Okay, great, but you're here now. What do you want to do? What does success look like from here? And where do we go? How can we help you get there? And I think that's realistic and important. I also see people sort of assume that if I don't argue back, like I'm either agreeing or I'm waiting for later to disagree. They don't engage with a level of urgency that I think, or responsiveness. They just sort of say, I don't think I agree with that, but we'll address it later. That's called passive aggression, right? It doesn't, you just don't have time to not be honest in this work. And so, digging in on that honesty, and if your investor says, look, I think we need to try and get 50 cents on the dollar for this thing. If you're not in agreement, say it.
Yeah.
Have that conversation.
Totally.
And I think that helped us.
Totally. All right, Jim's a lot bigger than me. He's giving me the hand signals, but I do want to get to.
It's not the middle finger.
Not this time. So so what I do want to talk about, maybe just real quick lightning round, the outcome. So you're going through this whole journey, right? And you're hitting starting line after starting line, and you're looking at an opportunity to exit. What for you was the trigger point to start having those conversations? Was it a process you wanted to run at a certain time? Number-based, time-based? How'd you think about it?
Well, there's a lot of things that go into this, but I'll just hit on a couple key things. I mean, I think we were, we had gotten through the growing pains from 3 to 10, and updated the leadership team, and the people who get you from B to C are not the ones that get you to D, E, and F, and we had basically focused on K-12. We had told all these higher ed customers that we could have gotten, but we thought would make us mediocre in multiple markets. We said not yet. We had been turning down international opportunities, and we had launched a new business for ed tech providers that, talk about a fail test. We set a target of, we're going to invest this much, and if we get $750K of revenue this year, we'll continue to invest. We did $3.5 million on that particular product. It was like, oh, this is what product market fit feels like. We've been talking about it. Product market fit, by the way, is like sex in middle school. Everybody talks about it. Nobody's really doing it.
I wasn't ready for that.
But real, true product market fit, once you feel it, you will be an entrepreneur for life, because there's nothing that feels better than PMF. But we recognized, oh, now I know what I could do with $10 million in the bank. We would be investing in a higher ed sales force. We would be going after 2 to 4 of our international opportunities. We are going to go do this.
And how did you go about aligning outcome objectives with your investors? And I'll ask because of this. Our outcome objective when we invested in a Fund 1 company, our first fund, which was smaller, investors, when you make this run, like, the number of people knocking on the door goes up. And so I was taking 1 to 2 unsolicited, inbounds a day. I wasn't taking them, I was getting them, and knew that there was interest. And so we decided to run a process. We thought there was risk, in the future, but basically we told a story that said, if we could put $20 million into the business, 10 on the balance sheet, take some folks out, or capitalize some folks, we've got the leadership team to take this. But if anybody wants to come over top, we'll listen to that argument. And so we ended up having a minority venture round. So that would have been a sort of classic Series B financial, PEs, private equity that wanted majority stake and to do a roll up or be a platform, and strategics. And ultimately, the strategic alignment with the largest publicly traded company in education at the time, Instructure, which, if you've used Canvas, the learning management system, ultimately we chose them and they chose us. And after we launched the process in Labor Day, just before Labor Day, and we closed December 15th, so under 6 months. Merry Christmas.
Ran the process. Yes. Yeah, it was a very Merry Christmas for a lot of people.
Great.
Okay, guys, we have time for 2 questions, but if you want a beer, go now. The bartender's leaving at 6. So if you want a beer, bring it back in here. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not going to
I have a question.
Yeah, you talked about sort of your team getting you from A to B to C, and how the same goes to get you from D to E. How do you transition that? Do those people who know their A, B, and C sort of team members say, you know what, once we get here, we're going to transition to somebody else? How do they even?
I love this question. It's so critical. I'll tell you what I did. I think there's a bunch of ways to think about this, but everybody who came into the company, I talked to at one point either right before they were hired or right after. Usually it was before, because I'd ask them a couple questions. But I go through our core values, and one of the things I communicated to them, we had this, they call it Dharma, which is a goal-setting sort of doll. I can tell you more about it. But ultimately, I communicated to them, look, we review these core values every year, and the company gives feedback on if we need to update or shift these to the point. The company is going to do what the company needs to do to move forward. But I want this to be successful for you as an individual, as well as the company. The company is going to be successful. We're going to continue to communicate what metrics look like and how that goes. We're going to, our goal is to not completely screw this up. We're going to do that. But that means there may be shifts, and there may be shifts for you professionally. And you may get here and see that, actually, I don't love marketing. I want to go in this direction. Or, the nice thing about being a rule of 50 company, growing anywhere between 50 and 100% a year, is we're going to have a lot of seats to fill. So you might have that opportunity here, but there may be opportunities elsewhere that fit your professional path, and I will support you to get those too. So whether it's here or somewhere else, I want you to be successful. And so even when they were coming in, I set the stage to say, I'm committed to your professional success. And if that's here or anywhere else, I will be helpful for you. I've gotten two reference checks since I got here today for former employees. Because of that, we would set that up because we knew the type of business we were growing, we were going to have that type of growth. People were not going to retire from the business. So for me, we set that up right from the jump. It's going to be hard though sometimes.
You.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
You talked a couple of times today about accelerants, and
Yeah.
one of the things you said was you used impact as an accelerant. So to me, that sounded like it was intentional, community impact, and then accelerate what's working there. And then the second thing you said was you used accelerant for technology adoption during COVID, which was incidental acceleration. So my question for you is, how much of your acceleration in your growth stage of the company was planned, and how much was incidental, and how much was just luck?
You never got lucky, did you?
I've never been lucky.
Okay.
Look, I think luck favors the bold, right? I think let me step back for just a second. Impact, when we talk about impact, especially in financial situations, it's usually considered a cost, right? And it's slower growth, lower returns. Oh, we're impact investors. We don't look for market rate return. Or an outcome. If we do this, this thing will help other people. What I'm talking about is impact-centered leadership, and I'm actually in the midst of supporting some work around this, impact for scale. I think there's a way, and we proved it, to harness impact at the center of your decision-making, to accelerate decision-making so that you outperform peers. And that's what we did. The hardest part about growing a business is there's 5 parts of the business: the product, strategy and solutions, the business model, the financing, the operating structure or strategy, and the culture. Those 5 things, each of those 5 things is challenging. But the governor on your growth will be synchronizing those 5 things. We've all been in organizations that sales is selling something that product hasn't made. Or product is building something that sales isn't selling. Or you're running low on cash. Number 1 rule of startups, don't run out of cash, right? And you got to do this other stuff. And so what I mean by that is there is a way to harness impact as an accelerant. If anybody asks me around the journey, like, oh, we're seeing such great things, you guys are doing awesome, fantastic work, I'd say thank you. We have not completely screwed this up yet. How much of it was luck and how much of it was being really thoughtful and honest about what was happening and being responsive. The best way to do that is to be able to harness decision-making quickly and equip your team to make decisions in the same direction, the same way. Because nobody, like, when those things get out of whack, marketing's not trying to screw over sales or product. They're doing what they think is best. They just aren't connected to some of the other decisions and learning that's happening. Likewise with your culture or operating structure. So when you can align those things around the impact you want to have, I think it becomes a lot quicker.
Okay, my sponsor has one last question, because if I don't let the sponsor ask the question, he's not going to renew. So, again, the bartender's leaving in 10 minutes. You will not be able to get a drink. So please we have so much beer, please go grab a drink. Drew, what's your question, sir?
You guys both mentioned conviction, and maybe I don't know the terminology properly, but I think of that as the why and the belief behind maybe what you're doing. Is that a correct statement? Like why you're going after something and why you want to provide a solution, and your passion and that kind of working with the investor or potential investor with the person seeking funding. Is that a correct?
I couldn't sum it up better than what Karl said, which is confidence. Like, a lot of CEOs come in and talk to us with confidence or go into a sales pitch with confidence, right? It's then you turn around and, like, when you go home at night and you're sitting there, you're so excited about the opportunity you just pitched that you really believe in it. Like, when I go out and raise, I'll flip it to the fundraising side. All that $100 million that we raised, we go out and raise it. We go tell investors that we believe in this opportunity, we believe in the market that we're investing in. You have to have confidence to go out and do that, but you have conviction, right? We're putting our own money behind it. There's a lot of things we can do. This is what I want to do because I believe in what I'm telling people about this market, about this stage, about that. And that's how like I feel at the end of the day. I have conviction, and that allows you, I think that transfers through in your presentation. People can feel it when you're there.
Well, and it can be faked. Sorry, did you?
I just kind of add on to the
Yeah.
question I want to ask. Do
you're
people
pushing your luck, bro.
often have too much of the conviction that hurts the other streams of the business operation and functionality of it, and startup especially?
Yeah. So, look, as a sales guy, like I have confidence. I could sell you something I don't believe in because I have a process for selling that, right? I may not care deeply about it, but like, you know, sell me this pen type stuff, we could probably do that and do so with confidence. In fact, when I'm testing things, I may have to bring huge confidence to that to get other people to sign on to it. But the thing that I see the most of is confusion of that confidence and your own internal conviction. Is this the right path? And what I think Tim is highlighting is, you know, oftentimes you can tell the difference. I would say to your secondary question, which is sort of, do you see people overstate their conviction? By definition, I don't think you can overstate conviction. I think you show a lot of confidence. You may misconstrue it, or you may not value not having conviction in the other areas. What I mean is like, this might be the right thing to do for kids. But if it doesn't have a business model, it's not going to go anywhere. And so you have to be able to drive the other. You may have no conviction around the other stuff and just be ignoring that. Or not have, you may have, you know, again, conviction on all the other stuff, but your culture in the organization is undermining your ability to deliver on those things. And you haven't actually taken the time to figure out and build conviction that this is aligned.
Hey, how much time do we need to shut the whole shebang down?
We're good till like 6:30.
Okay, so these guys are going to be here answering your questions. Please thank them for their time.